It was a quiet morning on Earth when the first sign of the alien threat appeared. Across the globe, people went about their daily routines, unaware that their world was about to change forever. In the skies, above the clouds, a strange signal began to broadcast. It was a message, encrypted and coming from deep space. The transmission was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, and it appeared to be a warning. At first, no one took it seriously. Earth had seen countless failed attempts of alien invasions and hoaxes. But as the hours passed, the signal became clearer. It wasn't just random noise, it was a pattern. The world's top scientists and military leaders scrambled to decode it, but no one could understand its true meaning. That was until the government of the United States received an urgent call. The transmission, which had been picked up by satellites, wasn't just a warning. It was an invitation. The message came from a race known as the Galactic Empire, and they were on their way to Earth. Their mission: to conquer, to enslave, and to take Earth's resources for their own. A wave of panic swept through the world. Governments went into lockdown. The news stations, usually full of ordinary reports, now carried breaking news every minute. The Galactic Empire was real, and they were coming. The United Nations called an emergency summit. World leaders gathered in secret, afraid of what was to come. They didn't know what the Galactic Empire's forces looked like or how powerful they were, but they did know one thing: Earth was about to face an enemy like no other. The message that had been received was clear: Earth is the next target in our expansion. Prepare for your submission. But not all hope was lost. In the shadows of the meeting, there was one individual who had a different story to tell. A mysterious delegate from the Galactic Empire had arrived. His name was Tarek, and he was different from the invaders that Earth had expected. Tarek wasn't like the others in the Empire. He didn't look like a cold-blooded conqueror, nor did he carry the arrogance many thought would accompany an alien overlord. Tarek's presence was unsettling, yet strange. He was a tall figure, his dark eyes sharp with urgency. His clothes were simple, yet unlike anything Earthlings had seen. He was not dressed in the attire of a military general, but rather something that hinted at his higher status, almost regal. He had requested a meeting with the leaders of Earth, and it had been granted. The news spread like wildfire, and the world watched in anticipation. As Tarek entered the large council room, the room fell silent. The weight of his presence was overwhelming, and the world's leaders couldn't help but feel a shiver of fear. Would he be the one to give them the orders for their surrender? Would Earth be crushed beneath the Empire's boot, just as the message had warned? But Tarek had other plans. He didn't come with demands for Earth's immediate submission. Instead, he came with a warning of his own. He wasn't there to serve the Empire's will. No, Tarek had defected. He was a rebel within the Empire, and he had a message to deliver. "The Galactic Empire is coming," Tarek began, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "But not all of us in the Empire agree with its goals. I am one of the few who have seen the truth. The Empire will not stop at Earth. They will destroy everything. I have come to offer you a choice. Fight, and you might have a chance to survive. Surrender, and the Earth will be lost forever." The leaders of Earth were stunned. Some were skeptical, others terrified. Was this truly a defector, or was it part of a trap? Was Tarek playing both sides? How could they trust a stranger who claimed to have come from the very empire that was threatening to destroy them? Before anyone could respond, the screens in the meeting room flickered to life. A live feed appeared, showing the vastness of space. There, on the edge of the galaxy, was a fleet of ships, massive, dark, and uncountable. They were real. The Galactic Empire's armada had arrived. The sight was overwhelming. The ships were unlike anything Earth had ever seen, and they seemed to stretch on forever. Their dark shapes filled the screen, and the cold silence from the feed sent a chill down everyone's spine. Tarek turned to face the leaders. "They are already here. The invasion is happening now. You must act quickly if you want any chance of surviving. The Empire will not negotiate. They will not listen to reason. They will only conquer. The room erupted in chaos. Questions flew. Fear spread like wildfire. Some demanded to know how Tarek could be trusted. Others called for immediate military action. The debate was loud and fierce. But one thing was certain. The world's leaders were divided. As the meeting continued, the reality of the situation began to settle in. Earth was facing an enemy that might be unbeatable, but Tarek was their only hope. With the threat of total annihilation looming, the question remained, could they trust him? And above them, in the cold, black expanse of space, the fleet of the Galactic Empire loomed closer and closer. Earth's countdown had begun. Would humanity rise to the challenge, or would they fall to the might of the Empire? As the leaders of Earth debated furiously, the air was thick with uncertainty and fear. The conference room, once a place of diplomacy and cooperation, had turned into a battleground of words. Some insisted that Tarek, the mysterious delegate from the Galactic Empire, was a traitor and a liar. Others, desperate for any hope, clung to his words, believing that his warning might be humanity's only chance. Tarek stood at the head of the room, his expression calm but his eyes filled with the weight of the truth he had just shared. He knew the danger humanity faced, and he knew that time was running out. The Imperial fleet was already in orbit, and Earth's defenses were not nearly advanced enough to face the might of the Galactic Empire. One by one, the world leaders spoke up, voicing their doubts and questions. A representative from China, her face pale with fear, stood and asked, "How do we know you're not a part of this invasion? Why should we believe you when you say the Empire will destroy us?" Tarek's eyes locked with hers, his voice steady but filled with passion. "I understand your skepticism," he said, "but I have seen the Empire's true face. I have seen their cruelty. And I have seen what they do to worlds like yours. I have chosen to defy them, to stand against their empire, and I came to warn you. If Earth surrenders now, it will become nothing more than a resource, a lifeless rock in the Empire's endless expansion. But if you fight, you stand a chance." The room fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of his words hung in the air like a dark cloud. The world was divided, torn between fear and the possibility of resistance. Finally, the President of the United States, a tall, stoic man who had remained quiet until now, stood. His voice rang out with authority, cutting through the tension. "We can't just surrender without a fight. But how do we even begin to stand up to an enemy that vast and powerful?" Tarek's gaze shifted to the large screen behind him, showing the image of the Galactic Empire's fleet. Hundreds, no, thousands, of ships filled the screen. They were dark, like shadowy giants, each one larger than anything Earth had ever built. Each ship was an entire city of weapons, technology far beyond anything humanity had developed. The threat was terrifying, but Tarek wasn't here to cause panic. He was here to help Earth fight back. "I have information," Tarek said, his voice low and serious. "Information that can help you defeat the Empire. But it will not be easy. You will need to trust me, and you will need to act fast. The Empire has a weapon so powerful that no army on Earth could stop it. But I have a way to counter it." The room was filled with murmurs. A weapon so powerful that even Earth's best military forces stood no chance. What could possibly be strong enough to fight the Galactic Empire? "I have defected from the Empire," Tarek continued. "And because of that, I am considered a traitor, a fugitive. If the Empire finds me here, they will destroy me. But I will take that risk for your world. The Empire's ultimate weapon is a massive energy generator. It powers their fleet and gives them the strength to conquer. If we can disable it, the Empire's invasion force will be rendered useless. They will lose all power. Without their energy, their ships will be powerless. Their weapons will fail." The leaders were stunned. The plan sounded almost too good to be true. Disable the weapon, and the Empire's entire fleet would fall apart. Could it really be that simple? "But how do we destroy this weapon?" one of the leaders asked. her voice tinged with doubt. "You said it was their power source. How can we possibly reach it?" Tarek's eyes narrowed as he spoke again, his voice a mixture of determination and desperation. "I know the location of the weapon. It's buried deep within a world that the Empire has already conquered. It's on a planet they've completely taken control of. But there is one problem. You will need to infiltrate their territory. It's a dangerous mission, and you'll be facing the might of the entire Empire. The journey will not be easy." There was a long pause as the leaders exchanged glances, weighing the risks. Some were eager to act, others unsure. But the more they thought about it, the more they realized they had no other choice. The Empire's invasion was already underway. Earth was on the brink of destruction, and the only chance for survival was to take the fight to the Empire itself. Finally, the President spoke again, his voice firm and resolute. "We have no choice. We will send a team. They will go after this weapon, and we will trust Tarek's plan. But we'll need the best soldiers, the best technology we have." Tarek nodded, relieved that the leaders had agreed, but he knew the hardest part was still ahead. The mission will be dangerous, and the team will need to be prepared for everything. But remember, this is Earth's last chance. The Galactic Empire will stop at nothing to crush you. But if you strike first, if you disable their weapon, you will have a fighting chance. The meeting was adjourned, but as the leaders left, the weight of the decision hung heavily in the air. The fate of the Earth now rested on the shoulders of a small team of soldiers, sent on a desperate mission to save the planet. Meanwhile, above Earth, the shadow of the Galactic Empire loomed ever closer. The fleet was waiting, and time was running out. As the leaders of Earth made their decision, the world watched in a mix of hope and fear. The President's speech had echoed across every major broadcast network, assuring citizens that humanity would fight back. Yet, for every person who believed the words of their leaders, there were countless others filled with doubt. Could Earth really stand against such a mighty force? Could they really defeat the Galactic Empire with its enormous fleet and seemingly unstoppable technology? But the leaders of Earth had made their choice. A special forces team was assembled. A diverse group of soldiers, scientists, and engineers, each handpicked for their skill, courage, and resourcefulness. They would be tasked with infiltrating the heart of the Empire, locating their power source, and disabling it. It was a mission that would require precision, intelligence, and an unshakable will to survive. Among the team was Captain Sarah Moore, a seasoned military leader known for her quick thinking and unyielding determination. She had led Earth's forces in several high-stakes missions, but this was different. This wasn't just another battle. This was the fate of the entire world at stake. She would be the one to lead humanity's most important mission ever. Next was Dr. Emilio Vargas, a brilliant scientist whose expertise in energy systems was unrivaled. His knowledge of high-level technology would be essential for understanding how to disable the Empire's weapon. While he wasn't used to field combat, his intellect was vital to the mission's success. Alongside them was Lieutenant Jax Carter, a skilled pilot who had spent years training for the fastest and most dangerous combat scenarios. His job was to get the team into the heart of the Empire's territory without being detected and get them out alive. It was a dangerous job, but Carter had faced the impossible before. Finally, there was Tarek, the former Galactic Empire delegate who had defected and now stood as Earth's reluctant ally. While Tarek's information was invaluable, his presence made the mission all the more precarious. If the Empire found out he had betrayed them, they would stop at nothing to eliminate him, and the team along with him. The moment the team gathered for their briefing, a sense of weight hung in the room. It was as if every second brought them closer to the edge of an abyss. "All right," Captain Moore began, her voice steady but firm. "We don't know exactly what we're going up against, but Tarek has told us that the Empire's weapon is buried on a planet known as Azarath, a world the Empire conquered long ago. It's highly protected. We'll have to sneak in, disable the weapon, and get out before the Empire knows what hit them." Dr. Vargas adjusted his glasses nervously. Captain, if the weapon is as powerful as Tarek says, we need to understand it completely. I need access to any available data on their technology. If we can disrupt their energy source, we might have a chance. Lieutenant Carter crossed his arms. And I need to know the exact location of this power generator. We can't afford to waste time looking around. We'll have a small window to strike before they lock everything down. Tarek spoke up from the back of the room, his voice low and filled with urgency. The Empire's defenses on Azarath are formidable. There are fleets in orbit, and ground troops will be everywhere. They've already begun preparations for the final phase of the invasion. You'll have to move quickly. Captain Moore turned to him, her expression hard. What else aren't you telling us, Tarek? Tarek hesitated, then slowly stepped forward. The Empire's leader, Empress Stalora, is a brilliant strategist. If she knows you're coming, she'll have every corner of Azarath locked down tighter than you can imagine. This mission isn't just about disabling the weapon. It's about surviving long enough to escape. The Empire will not show mercy. The team absorbed his words, each member understanding the severity of their mission. There would be no second chances. They had to succeed. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Fly under the Empire's radar, locate the power source, and disable it. Tarek had provided them with coordinates, but the rest of the mission would be a blur of danger, desperation, and speed. The enemy would be everywhere. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Equipment was gathered, and the team suited up. As they boarded their stealth ship, the reality of what they were about to face started to sink in. The ship, though highly advanced, was nothing compared to the massive warships of the Empire. The slightest mistake could lead to their discovery and swift destruction. As the engines roared to life, Captain Moore looked at her team, her face set in determination. We're humanity's last hope. If we don't succeed, Earth will fall. But if we do, the Empire will learn that Earth isn't a world to be conquered. Let's make sure we come back. With that, the ship took off, heading straight for the heart of enemy territory. The vastness of space stretched out before them, and the weight of the mission hung over them all. Each member of the team silently wondered if they were ready. Was humanity really prepared to face a force like the Galactic Empire? Would they survive long enough to strike back? As the ship entered the dark expanse of space, the planet Azarath came into view. It was a cold, desolate world, scarred by centuries of war. The planet's surface was a labyrinth of craters and ruined cities. It was a fitting place for the Empire to hide their most dangerous weapon. But there was no turning back. The team's mission was clear: infiltrate, disable the weapon, and escape. As they descended into Azarath's atmosphere, the Empire's fleet above remained unaware of their approach. For now, they had the element of surprise. But how long would that last? As the stealth ship descended through Azarath's atmosphere, the tension inside the cramped control room was palpable. The team sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, yet united by a singular purpose. Failure was not an option. They had no idea what awaited them on the surface of the planet, but the mission's stakes were clear. The fate of Earth hung in the balance. Captain Moore sat at the helm, eyes fixed on the sensors. She could see the planet's surface coming closer, a barren wasteland of jagged rocks and ruined cities. She knew the Empire had turned Azarath into a fortress, hiding its most dangerous weapon deep within its core. But even with all of Tarek's information, they had no real idea of the exact nature of the Empire's defenses. No one had ever managed to infiltrate Azarath and survive to tell the tale. "We'll need to keep our profile low," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice steady but his fingers tapping nervously on the control panel. "The Empire's sensors are powerful, and their ships are patrolling the skies. We can't afford to be detected. I'll guide us to the coordinates Tarek gave us, but we have to be careful. One wrong move and we're done." Dr. Vargas was hunched over a holographic display, scanning through data on the weapon. "This energy generator," Tarek said, "it's buried deep underground. We'll need to get past the outer defenses first. The Empire's military is heavily entrenched here. If we're discovered, we won't stand a chance." Tarek, who had been silent up until now, spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's a tunnel system beneath the city ruins. It's old, but it should provide cover. That's your best bet to avoid detection. Once you're inside the tunnels, you'll need to keep moving. The Empire has sensors in place, but if you can stay in the shadows, you might slip past." Captain Moore nodded, her face set in determination. "All right, everyone. You know what's at stake. Let's get this done." The ship crept closer to the surface, skimming the craggy terrain with expert precision. The outskirts of the ruined city came into view, a once thriving metropolis now reduced to broken buildings and empty streets. There was no sign of life. At least, not on the surface. The Empire's forces were likely watching from the shadows, ready to strike at any moment. Lieutenant Carter brought the ship into a hover above an abandoned plaza, the spot Tarek had identified as the entrance to the tunnels. The craft's cloaking system kept it hidden from enemy scanners, but they all knew it wouldn't last forever. They had minutes, not hours, before the Empire would notice something was amiss. "We're here," Carter said, his voice tense. Captain Moore turned to the rest of the team. "We move quickly and quietly. Get in, disable the weapon, and get out. No heroics. We stick together, no matter what." The door to the ship opened, and the team stepped into the desolate plaza. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was deafening. The once great city of Azarath seemed like a ghost town, abandoned and forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. But they knew better. The Empire was always watching. As they made their way toward the entrance to the tunnels, the team's boots echoed softly on the cracked pavement. Their nerves were on edge, each of them alert for any sign of movement. It was too quiet, too still. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then, without warning, a faint hum filled the air, barely audible at first. It grew louder, more intense, until the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The team halted, exchanging wary glances. Was it an earthquake? A tremor from the planet's core? "No," Tarek said, his voice tight with fear. "It's not an earthquake. It's the Empire's underground base. They've activated the defense systems. You're not alone." The hum intensified, and suddenly, the ground exploded in front of them. Rocks and debris flew into the air as the tunnel entrance collapsed in a burst of blinding light. The team dove for cover, their hearts racing. From the dust and smoke, figures began to emerge, shadowy figures in dark armor, moving with deadly precision. "Ambush," Captain Moore shouted, drawing her weapon. "Get to the tunnel entrance. Now." The team sprang into action. Jax Carter and Dr. Vargas led the way, sprinting toward the shattered tunnel entrance, while Captain Moore and Tarek fired back at the advancing enemy soldiers. The Empire's forces, clad in advanced combat armor, were closing in fast. Their weapons fired energy blasts that crackled through the air, striking the ground around them. Despite their best efforts, the team was being outmatched. The soldiers were too many, and their weapons too powerful. Moore's pulse raced as she ducked behind a crumbled wall for cover. Her mind raced. How had they been discovered so quickly? "Captain, we're not going to make it if we don't move." Lieutenant Carter yelled from the tunnel entrance. "We need to get in now." With no other choice, Captain Moore gave the signal. "Fall back to the tunnels. Move." The team sprinted toward the entrance, but the Empire's soldiers were hot on their heels. Just as they were about to make it inside, a blast of energy struck the ground just in front of Moore, sending her crashing to the ground. The air was knocked from her lungs as she tumbled forward, but she forced herself back to her feet. "Go, go, go," she yelled, as her team scrambled into the dark tunnel. Just as the last of them made it inside, Moore dove in, pulling the door closed behind her. The team was now in the underground labyrinth, and they had barely escaped the clutches of the Empire's forces. The air was damp and cold, But there was no time to rest. They could hear the sound of enemy soldiers above, searching for them. But for now, they were safe. However, the danger was far from over. They still had to find and disable the Empire's weapon. But as they moved deeper into the tunnels, an unsettling thought gnawed at the back of Moore's mind. If the Empire was this prepared for their arrival, what other traps were waiting for them? The tunnels were a maze, twisting and turning in ways that made even Tarek uneasy. The dim light from their flashlights barely illuminated the path ahead, casting long shadows on the jagged walls. Every step felt like it brought them deeper into enemy territory. The sound of their boots echoing against the stone was the only noise, though they knew the Empire's soldiers were still searching for them above. The air in the tunnels was thick with dust, and the walls seemed to close in around them as they moved forward. Captain Moore kept her eyes on the map Tarek had given them, guiding the team through the labyrinth. Her mind raced with thoughts of the ambush they had just escaped. How had they been discovered so quickly? Could the Empire have known about the mission from the start? "Stay alert," Moore whispered, her voice low but firm. "We don't know what's ahead." Dr. Vargas, who was carefully studying the device in his hands, nodded. "This underground base is vast. The power source should be just ahead. But I don't like the silence. There's something off about all this." Lieutenant Carter, ever the optimist, tried to keep the mood light. "It's too quiet for their liking. They'll be sending more patrols soon. We just need to find the generator and disable it before that happens." Tarek's face was grim, his eyes scanning the tunnels nervously. "The further we go, the more dangerous it becomes. The weapon you're looking for is in the center of the Empire's stronghold. But it's not just guarded by soldiers. There are security measures far beyond what you've seen. Trust me, they'll be expecting you." Captain Moore shot him a hard look. "I don't need any more warnings, Tarek. Just get us there." They continued forward, each of them acutely aware of the weight of their mission. With every step, they drew closer to the heart of the Empire's weapon. The further they went, the more oppressive the air seemed, as if the very tunnels were alive with the threat of danger. Eventually, the team arrived at a massive door, sealed tightly with a complex locking mechanism. Dr. Vargas moved forward, setting his device against the lock. The soft hum of his equipment was the only sound in the stillness as he worked. The rest of the team stood ready, weapons drawn, prepared for whatever might be on the other side. After what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Vargas nodded. "We're in. Everyone, be ready." The door slid open with a deep mechanical groan, revealing a large chamber bathed in an eerie blue glow. In the center of the room stood a massive energy generator, its core pulsating with raw power. The hum of energy filled the air, and the room seemed to vibrate with the force of it. But as they stepped into the chamber, the team realized that this wasn't just an ordinary power generator. It was much more than that. "This is it," Captain Moore whispered, her eyes fixed on the massive structure. "This is what we're here to destroy." But as they approached the generator, a sudden realization struck them. Something was wrong. The room was too quiet. The team began to fan out, searching for any sign of the Empire's presence. They were sure they hadn't been followed in, but the emptiness of the chamber felt unnatural. Then it happened. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and a deep mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "You dare to sabotage the Empire." A cold chill ran down Captain Moore's spine as a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a towering figure clad in dark, intricate armor, one they hadn't anticipated. The Empire's elite commander, General Volkar, stood before them, his helmet glinting in the dim light. "You will fail," Volkar's voice boomed. "The weapon you seek to destroy is already armed. The Empire's conquest of your planet is inevitable. You are too late." The team instinctively raised their weapons, but Moore knew they were facing something much more dangerous than just a handful of soldiers. This was the Empire's finest, someone who had been prepared for this very moment. "We didn't come this far to turn back now," Moore said, her voice steady. She signaled to the team to take cover, but Volkar was already in motion. The general moved with terrifying speed, his gauntlet shooting out a blast of energy that barely missed Dr. Vargas. The blast scorched the wall behind him, leaving a trail of burning debris in its wake. "Get to the generator," Moore shouted. "Disable it now." Carter and Vargas moved quickly toward the power source, but Volkar was already intercepting them. He raised his hand, and another blast of energy shot out, narrowly missing Carter as he dove for cover. The team fired back, but their shots were deflected by Volkar's advanced armor. The room was filled with the sound of gunfire and energy blasts as they fought for their lives. But even with their combined firepower, Volkar was a force to be reckoned with. Moore knew they had to act fast. The Empire wasn't going to give them another chance. They couldn't afford to keep exchanging fire. They needed to disable the generator, and they needed to do it now. "Dr. Vargas," Moore shouted, "can you disable the generator?" Vargas, looking determined but anxious, nodded. "I can try. It'll take a few minutes, but I think I can overload the system." Captain Moore took a deep breath. "Do it. We'll cover you." As Vargas worked frantically to disable the generator, Captain Moore and the others kept Volkar at bay. The room seemed to shrink with every passing second, the battle growing fiercer. Volkar was relentless, each move calculated and precise, but the team refused to back down. "I'm almost there," Vargas called out. "Just a few more seconds." With one final push, Vargas activated the system that would trigger the overload. The generator's hum intensified, the energy surging through the room as the team scrambled to retreat. "Now," Moore shouted. "Everyone out now." They turned and ran, but the blast was already starting. As the generator overloaded, a pulse of energy shot out from the core, sending a shockwave through the chamber. The team barely made it out in time as the explosion ripped through the heart of the Empire's weapon. The walls trembled, and debris rained down around them as they sprinted through the tunnels. The sound of the explosion echoed in their ears as they fought to stay ahead of the collapsing structure. Volkar's final words still echoed in their minds. "You are too late." But they had made it. They had struck a devastating blow to the Empire. But as they continued their escape, they knew the battle wasn't over. The Empire would be coming for them, and Earth's future was still uncertain. The tunnels shook violently as the team raced through them, the explosion from the generator still echoing in their ears. The roar of the blast had torn through the underground base, and the ground seemed to tremble with the aftermath. Yet, despite the massive destruction they had caused, Captain Moore knew that their mission wasn't over. "We've made it this far," Moore muttered to herself, pushing her legs to move faster, "but we're not out yet." The walls around them felt like they were closing in. The explosions had triggered alarms throughout the entire complex, and the sound of Empire soldiers rushing to intercept them echoed through the corridors. The countdown to their escape was ticking, and every second counted. "How much longer, Vargas?" Captain Moore asked, her voice steady but urgent. Vargas, still clutching his device, glanced at the flashing lights on the screen in front of him. "The exits are nearby. We should be able to reach the surface in 5 minutes, if nothing goes wrong." Lieutenant Carter, scanning their surroundings, nodded. "We need to move faster. The Empire will be flooding these tunnels any moment now." They had barely made it out of the heart of the Empire's base, but now it was a race against time. The team's pulse quickened with every footstep as they sped through the dark labyrinth of tunnels. The once quiet paths were now alive with the sounds of Empire forces searching for them, and Captain Moore had no illusion that they would let them slip away. They were on high alert, and any wrong move would mean certain death. Tarek, who had been silently following them, finally spoke up, his voice laced with fear. "The surface is too exposed. The Empire has reinforcements waiting at every exit. It's not safe out there." "We don't have a choice," Moore replied, her voice grim. "We're going to make it to the surface, and we'll fight our way out if we have to." The path ahead opened up, and they entered another chamber, a large, cavernous space with high ceilings and a narrow exit on the far side. The team paused for a moment, catching their breath. The air was thick with tension. The final hurdle stood before them, and they could hear the sound of Empire soldiers closing in from all directions. "We're running out of time," Moore said, her eyes scanning the exit. "Move." But as they started to make their way toward the exit, the sound of heavy boots on the metal floor echoed from behind them. The entrance was blocked. A group of Empire soldiers, about a dozen of them, appeared at the far end of the chamber, guns raised. Their armor gleamed in the low light, and their cold eyes locked onto the team. They had no intention of letting the intruders escape. Captain Moore raised her weapon, signaling the team to take cover behind the pillars and debris scattered around the room. The soldiers advanced, slowly, methodically. They knew the team was cornered, and they were waiting for the right moment to strike. "Hold your fire," Moore whispered to the team. "Wait for my signal." They waited, breath held, as the soldiers continued their march, unaware of the danger they were about to face. But Captain Moore's mind raced, searching for a plan, anything that could get them out of this alive. Then she noticed something. The far side of the chamber had a massive metallic door, slightly ajar. It was an emergency exit. "We make a break for that door," Moore said softly, locking eyes with her team. "We move on my command. Ready? 1, 2, 3. The team sprang into action. They ran across the room, using their weapons to create a distraction. Carter and Vargas fired their weapons at the Empire soldiers, forcing them to take cover. As the enemy soldiers returned fire, Moore and Tarek sprinted toward the emergency exit. The door was just within reach, but as they neared it, a blast of energy ripped through the air, hitting the ground inches from Moore's feet. She tumbled forward but quickly regained her footing. "Go," she yelled as the team reached the door. They pushed through the metal, and the chamber exploded in a hail of gunfire as they barreled into the narrow corridor beyond. "Keep moving," Moore shouted, leading them through the emergency exit. The hallway outside was dim, but they could see daylight up ahead. They were close to freedom. But just as they thought they were home free, the walls shook again, and the sound of a deep, mechanized voice boomed over the intercom system. "You will not escape." General Volkar's voice rang out, cold and commanding. "The Empire will find you. You will not leave this planet alive." The team kept running, their adrenaline pushing them forward. They could hear the distant sound of explosions and gunfire as the Empire's forces continued to close in. They had triggered something much bigger than they had anticipated. The Empire wasn't going to stop until they were all dead. They were nearing the surface, but there was still no sign of escape. Their only hope was to reach the surface and make it back to the ship before the Empire's forces overwhelmed them. "Almost there," Carter called out. "The surface is just ahead." They burst through the final door and onto the surface. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the barren landscape of Azarath. The air was thick, and the ground felt unstable beneath their feet. But as they stepped into the open, they saw it, an entire fleet of Empire ships waiting for them, parked on the edge of the city. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They were trapped. "We're surrounded," Vargas said, panic creeping into his voice. Captain Moore turned to face the team. She didn't have an answer, but she wasn't about to give up. "Stay sharp," she said. "We'll find a way out. We have to." Just as they were about to make their move, a massive rumble shook the ground, and the Empire's fleet began to lift off the surface. Their massive ships took to the sky, preparing to deploy their full force to hunt them down. But then, without warning, a large explosion rang out from the distance. One of the Empire's ships had been destroyed. And another. And another. The team turned in surprise. They couldn't believe their eyes. A new fleet of ships, human ships, emerged from behind the wreckage of a nearby building. Their guns blazed as they fired on the Empire's fleet, tearing through their defenses. "It's Earth's fleet," Carter shouted. They've come to rescue us. The Empire's forces faltered, their attention diverted. In the chaos, Captain Moore seized the opportunity. "Let's go," she yelled as they raced toward their ship. The human fleet was here, and they had one final chance to escape the Empire's grip. The chaos around them was deafening. The sound of gunfire, explosions, and shouts filled the air as Captain Moore and her team sprinted toward their ship. The Empire's fleet, though still formidable, was faltering under the unexpected onslaught from Earth's fleet. Ships from both sides collided in the sky above them, sending shockwaves through the ground. Moore's heart raced as she saw their ship, a small but powerful vessel, just ahead. They had made it this far, but their mission was far from complete. They had struck a devastating blow to the Empire's power, but they still needed to escape, to survive. "Get to the ship," Moore shouted, urging the team forward. They were close now, but the Empire wasn't giving up without a fight. Explosions lit up the sky, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Lieutenant Carter and Dr. Vargas were already ahead, moving quickly toward the ship's hatch. Tarek, who had been trailing behind to cover their retreat, kept glancing back nervously. "They're coming." Tarek shouted as more Empire soldiers emerged from the shadows, their blasters aimed directly at the team. It was clear that the Empire wasn't going to let them leave without a fight. Moore glanced up at the ship. They were almost there, but there was no way they'd make it without a fight. She turned to face the advancing soldiers, her hand gripping her blaster tightly. "We hold them off. Get to the ship." With a quick nod, the team spread out, taking cover behind whatever debris they could find. The Empire soldiers, relentless and well-trained, began firing, their weapons flashing in the dim light. The air around them seemed to hum with energy as blasts flew past, narrowly missing the team. The battle had shifted from a quiet infiltration mission to an all-out war. Captain Moore fired back, her shots precise and controlled. She had been in many battles, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and they couldn't afford to fail. "We need more time." Vargas yelled from behind cover, trying to hack into the ship's systems to prepare for takeoff. Carter fired back at the soldiers, his weapon blasting a soldier off his feet. "We don't have more time, Vargas. We need to go now." The enemy was closing in, and Moore knew they couldn't hold out much longer. She took a deep breath, then made her decision. "Cover me," Moore shouted, running toward the ship's hatch. She knew the others would follow, but it was her job to make sure they had the time they needed to escape. She threw herself into the open, firing on the soldiers advancing toward them. The sound of her blaster echoed across the battlefield as she fought to clear a path. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her, every movement calculated to ensure the team's survival. The Empire's forces, though numerous and powerful, were no match for her resolve. Her shots hit their targets, dropping soldiers one by one. But just as she reached the ship, a blast struck the ground near her feet, sending her sprawling to the dirt. She cursed, rolling behind the ship for cover. Her vision blurred for a moment, but she shook her head, clearing it. "Tarek, cover me," she yelled, dragging herself toward the hatch. She could feel the heat of the blast behind her as the Empire's forces closed in. Tarek, ever loyal, didn't hesitate. He laid down suppressing fire, ensuring that Moore had the chance to reach the hatch. The rest of the team followed, diving into the ship one by one, but not without a fight. The enemy was relentless, their blasters lighting up the area in a constant barrage of energy. Finally, Moore reached the hatch and dove into the ship, the doors sealing shut behind her with a hiss. She didn't wait for a second to catch her breath. She raced to the controls, her fingers flying over the ship's systems, preparing for takeoff. "Ready for liftoff," Moore called out to the team. Dr. Vargas was already at the engineering panel, frantically working to get the engines up and running. Carter and Tarek were covering the entrances, making sure no Empire soldiers could follow them inside. Outside, the Empire's forces launched another attack. But it was too late. Earth's fleet had already begun to engage the Empire's ships, and the entire area was engulfed in battle. The sound of explosions was deafening as ships collided and exploded in the sky above. "Hold on," Moore shouted to her team as the engines roared to life. The ship lurched upward, leaving the ground behind. They had made it out, for now, but their relief was short-lived. As the ship soared into the sky, the team could see the full scope of the battle. The Empire's forces were vast, but Earth's fleet was proving to be a formidable force. Still, it was clear that the war wasn't over. "We've got the data," Vargas said, turning to Moore with a look of grim determination. "But the Empire won't stop hunting us. They're already mobilizing more forces." Moore nodded, her mind racing. They had accomplished what they set out to do, destroying the weapon, crippling the Empire's power. But the war was far from over. The Empire would not give up, and Earth's survival depended on their next moves. "We'll fight," Moore said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "But this time, we'd fight on our terms. No more hiding. No more running." As the ship broke through the atmosphere, Moore glanced out the window. Earth was below them, a small blue planet in the vastness of space. But it was their home, and they would defend it to the very end. "We're just getting started," Moore whispered to herself as the ship flew toward the horizon, ready to face the Empire's full wrath.